History tells the story of the world and of our lives. Sometimes that history goes bump in the night. Broadcasting from the center of oddity and the supernatural in Central Florida, it's the History Goes Bump podcast.
Hello, you spooktacular people. Welcome to History Goes Bump Redux. I am your host, Diane.
And this is Kelly.
Kelly, on this Redux, we're going back to the Ohio State Reformatory. Looking forward to this one. There's all kinds of hauntings going on here.
Very excited.
Are you ready to go back?
I'm ready. The Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield was originally meant to help wayward young men get back on the right road. The beautiful Gothic reformatory built of iron and limestone is so picturesque that it was used as a location in the movie The Shawshank Redemption. What happened to many of the residents of this building was anything but beautiful, and certainly was not about truly reforming young men. Stories that include torture, beatings, and other misdeeds are numerous. And wherever strong emotions are built up, we usually find some kind of unexplained phenomenon. Join us as we explore the history and hauntings of the Ohio State Reformatory.
The state of Ohio was once known as the Northwest Territory until it was officially admitted to the Union in 1803. General James Hedges would lay out the initial area of what would become Mansfield, Ohio, in 1807. There were no settlers here at the time, but within a year, a man named Jacob Newman had built a cabin. He came with a housekeeper and 4 nieces and nephews. I'm assuming a sibling had passed away, and so he was in charge of the kids. The town of Mansfield was officially founded on June 11, 1808 by Joseph Larwell, Jacob Newman, and James Hedges. The town was right near a fork in the Mohican River. The Surveyor General of the United States at that time was Jared Mansfield, and the residents decided that Mansfield would be a fitting name for their town since he had helped with the plotting. In 1846, a railroad line was built in Mansfield that traveled to Sandusky, and the town really began to flourish and grow at that time. Hudson Roeder and Company was a major cigar company that based itself in Mansfield, and by 1888 it was the largest employer in town. Other manufacturing in Mansfield produced paper boxes, linseed oil, brass objects, doors, and even suspenders. And Kelly, a little fun fact, Johnny Appleseed was from Mansfield.
Oh! There was much strife in the area as this part of Ohio became one of the last stands of the Native Americans as they tried to fight being pushed more west. Settlers had a hard time as they faced raids and massacres like the Copus Massacre and Zimmer Massacre, and if that didn't get them, there was starvation and disease. In a field in Mansfield, a training area was set up for Civil War soldiers in 1861. The camp was named Camp Mordecai Bartley after the governor of the state who served in the 1940s. In 1867, it was decided that the area would be perfect for the Intermediate Penitentiary. That is the name that the reformatory would originally go by. It was named Intermediate because it was meant to be a midway stop between the Boys Industrial School in Lancaster and the State Penitentiary in Columbus. This would be a place for first-time offenders. The city of Mansfield and the state of Ohio worked together to purchase 180 acres of land, and they spent over $1.3 million to construct the facility.
The architect for the reformatory was a local Cleveland architect by the name of Levi T. Schofield. Schofield drew inspiration from his travels through Europe, and he wanted the reformatory to have a castle-like appearance. He decided to use 3 styles of architectural design. These styles were Queen Anne, Victorian Gothic, and Richardsonian Romanesque, leading many to think that the reformatory is chateau-like in appearance. And it is indeed a beautiful building. Many involved in the creation of the jail hoped that the structure would somehow inspire those locked within to change their lives and turn from a sinful life to a spiritual one. Much of the stone used in the construction came from the Devil's Punch Bowl off Worcester Road. Another architect named F.F. Schnitzer completed the construction and became the first superintendent of the reformatory. The cornerstone was laid on November 4th, 1886, with Schnitzer's name on it, and there was much fanfare in Mansfield, including a parade. They were very excited to have this kind of jail in their midst, I guess. Most people are not happy to have something that's like a jail in their midst, but...
Even before it was finished, the structure changed names, and in 1891, it became officially known as the Ohio State Reformatory. The East Wing became famous for its unique cell block structure. The cell block was built from steel and rose 6 tiers and was amazingly freestanding. The only cell block in the world to be freestanding at that height. The doors of the reformatory officially opened in September 1896, even though construction would continue until 1910. 150 young men were the first occupants, and as they arrived on the train, they saw their future home and remarked that it looked like Dracula's castle. They had plenty of room in the structure as it was built to house 1,600 boys. Their crimes ranged from robbery to rape to manslaughter. All the boys were set to work on digging the sewer system for the reformatory as it hadn't been completed yet. Since this was a place meant to reform rather than punish, the boys were taught trades, and many would do farm work and build roads. More buildings were added to the property, and these were all built by the inmates. In 1912, a furniture factory was opened, and one document shows that in 1931, 150 inmates created and sold 18,000 pieces of furniture.
They were busy.
Yes, they were. There was also a machine shop, shoe factory, and clothing factory.
But life in the reformatory was similar to full-blown prison, with boys creating shanks and shivs. Violence between inmates was very high. The 1930s would see such an influx of first-time offenders that the prison became overcrowded. Most of the staff lived at the reformatory as well. It was kind of set up like its own little city, very similar to asylums and stuff. They actually had thought about making this an asylum for a while, too. Inmates claimed that the place was overrun by rats and disease. A few dozen inmates died from TB. The food was unpalatable. Sweat boxes were used to mainly punish black prisoners. The worst place to go was the hole. These were solitary confinement cells, and inmates sometimes had to sleep on the concrete floors. Following a riot, 120 inmates were thrown into the hole. That's a lot of men having to share only 20 cells. They were forced to stay in there for 30 days. One inmate was murdered during the punishment. In 1948, a prison farmer and his family were murdered by an inmate. The property has a cemetery with over 200 numbered headstones, so that means you had at least 200 people who died here.
The Boyd Consent Decree was issued by a judge in 1986 after several lawsuits about the inhumane conditions at the reformatory were brought before him. The decree ordered the facility to be closed, and another structure was built to the west. That opened as the Mansfield Correctional Institute. The doors to the Ohio State Reformatory closed officially on December 31, 1990, and in its time, the reformatory had housed over 155,000 men. The facility is now run by the Mansfield Reformatory Preservation Society, and tours are conducted from April through September. It becomes a haunted attraction during the Halloween season called Blood Prison and runs from the end of September to November. The 2024 season starts on September 27th.
So get your tickets now.
You can get a touch pass, which means the actors can touch you.
Oh, no. Nope, not me.
Parapsychon is hosted here as well. This stands for Paranormal and Psychic Convention. This year, 2024, it runs from May 17th to 19th, and they'll have Hearse Mania. Yep, a car show of hearses.
I mean,
I
how
be there.
cool is that? Apparently, this Hearse Mania goes around the country and is hosted in a different place, I think, each year.
Awesome. And they also have something for runners like Diane, the Shawshank Hustle. It's a 7K.
Yeah, I've never heard of a 7K before. So
not common.
I don't know what the symbolism of that is, but I was like, ooh, I like the Shawshank Hustle. It's like you're running from jail.
It will run in August in 2024, and you can do it virtually. Some people call the place Shawshank as it was the setting for the film Shawshank Redemption.
So love that movie. Just a great movie.
Yes, indeed.
The reformatory not only gained fame being used as a location in films, it also has been investigated by several reality TV paranormal shows. These include My Ghost Story, Paranormal Challenge, Ghost Hunters Academy, Ghost Adventures, Scariest Stories on Earth, Scariest Places on Earth, and Ghost Asylum, among
Just a few.
ton. Yeah.
Just a few.
And those are just the biggies. The reason for so many appearances on paranormal shows is that the Ohio State Reformatory is considered to be one of the most haunted places in America, and based on our recent paranormal conversation with our listener Janae, who shared her experiences from a visit to the reformatory, we'd have to say that something unexplained is happening there. There are many reasons for there to be hauntings here. Obviously, jails harbor many emotions, but there were events that also contribute to the hauntings.
Warden Arthur Lewis Glatk was a hard man. He served as warden from 1935 to 1959. He and his wife Helen lived in the administration wing. It was in 1950 that his wife Helen died in that wing after an accidental gunshot. She apparently was reaching into a jewelry box when the gun went off. She contracted pneumonia while recovering and died 3 days after the accident. Was it truly an accident, or had the warden killed his wife? Some believe the latter. When he later died after having a heart attack in his office, haunting activity began in the administration wing. Helen wore rose-scented perfume, and it is sometimes smelled in the hallways. She also reportedly likes to visit the library. The warden has been heard in his office saying, "Catch me if you can." Okay. Or it could be an inmate saying something to the warden.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's more that.
Yeah, that's what I would think. Pictures have been photographed of what looks like someone sitting in the warden's chair.
The chapel is haunted by strange noises and shadowy figures that disappear quickly when spotted. Unusual photographs have been taken inside as well. Occasionally, people claim to feel as though they are being touched by a spider web, even though they've not actually walked through a spider web. We always think of that as like some kind of ectoplasm you can't see.
Yeah, I mean, I liken it also to that electric feel when
Yes,
you are being
static electricity kind of
touched
thing.
by a spirit.
Others are scratched or pushed. Disembodied screams are heard in the hallways as if someone were being tortured. The sounds of cell doors slamming shut echo in the corridors. One of the wayward boys at the reformatory was a 14-year-old boy who was beaten so badly he died. The incident took place in the basement, and it is believed that his spirit now knocks about the place. The basement is also where the hole is located. Because of the severe punishments that took place here, anyone who enters claims to feel a certain malevolence, and even glowing eyes have been witnessed.
Sandra experienced a nose picture in 2007 and wrote of it. My family toured the Ohio State Reformatory last weekend when we were in that area for another occasion. I didn't know anything about the place before going on the tour. While we were in the area where the warden and his wife used to live, my 8-year-old son was getting tired of listening to the guide, so we started browsing through the rooms alone. We walked into a room and I immediately started to smell roses. Without saying what I smelled, I asked my son if he could smell anything. He answered, "Yes, flowers." A moment later, others from the tour walked into the room and the smell instantly disappeared. After the tour, I mentioned my experience to a volunteer at the front desk. She told me that the warden's wife, Helen, loved roses. When I got home, I started searching online for information about the reformatory. Several links mentioned visitors smelling roses. It meant that Helen was near. I didn't believe in the supernatural going in, but since I specifically smelled roses without any knowledge of previous stories, I definitely believe now. I didn't want my son to be scared by the experience, so I told him Helen must have liked us because she took the time to say hello to us and left when the others came in.
And now a little break for a word about one of our sponsors. A woman named Carrie was on a ghost hunt and reported to the website Grave Addiction in 2007 the following experience. I just got back from visiting the OSR, and a group of us had an experience in the cell block. The cell that I am speaking of is the one marked with the X that has been reported to have activity. We were taken back to the block when the tour was over. There were about 9 of us along with the guide. We heard someone running. The guide asked who was running because there shouldn't be anyone. Immediately the cell door slammed shut. It scared us all, and we wasted no time at all getting out of there. The guide was so scared that he was soaking wet with sweat.
Oh my goodness.
He works there. Hasn't he experienced stuff
Exactly.
before?
A woman named Gina reported, "Our group was walking down metal stairs from the tower. My friend and I in the back with some high school students in front. I'm clumsy. Well, I can relate. And held tight to my friend's hand and the railing. Someone slapped my back. I fell forward into my friend and over the side of the railing. My arm clutched as my muscles pulled to a painful angle, then down to a knee. I quickly spun to face my attacker. No one was there."
Randy wrote of his visit, "On my last visit to the Mansfield, my camera and recorder picked up some tapping on the walls of a jail cell. My friend and I thought it was Morse code. My buddy was military and familiar with the code. He listened closely. It wasn't Morse. We thought it was a code developed by prisoners to communicate without the guards knowing. The tapping noise was caught on our recorder just in that cell, no other time during our visit. I wish it was Morse code because then they could at least try to decipher it."
A tour guide named Michelle reported, "I worked in Mansfield last year and was assigned to the hole, me and another girl in the empty space on opposite ends. We heard shuffling around the hallway. Thinking it was visitors who didn't know we were there, I looked over to the other girl and smiled as if to say, 'Let's scare them.'
Sounds like a Kelly thing to do.
She smiled back. We jumped out and screamed. The hallway was empty. The shuffling, gone." Jared was a tour guide who started working at Mansfield in 2009. He shared the following experience. "On our first night volunteering for a ghost walk, we heard loud footsteps at the far end of the east cell block, and upon turning on the flashlight, we discovered that no one was there. In the west cell block, I had the whole left side of my body get so cold it started turning numb. In West Administration, I saw a shadow figure move rapidly up the stairs to the third floor. We have also captured numerous EVPs, including profanity, whistling, and random voices. I have also heard the cell doors slamming closed when in fact they don't move at all."
Sherry Brake wrote The Haunted History of the Ohio State Reformatory in 2010, and she shared accounts from the Northeastern Ohio Paranormal Investigation Center. We actually met Sherry Brake at the Haunted America conference.
Yes, we did.
And she autographed the book that I'm holding right now. Two of the investigators with that group are Justin Fink and Joey Butler. Justin Fink said, "On our first visit to the Ohio State Reformatory in August 2009, most of the EVPs that we collected and the personal experiences took place in the warden's quarters. While we were walking down the hall investigating, I suddenly had a strange feeling that someone or something had touched my arm. At first I thought it might have been a breeze blowing through the building, but after further investigation, we found there were no windows open, and on that particular night, the air outside was still. Another strange incident was the moving pane of glass on the landing of the stairs. Joey was walking ahead of me, and as he had passed by the window, the glass had moved and made a clunk sound. I asked him if he touched it, and he said no. I reached out and touched it, and it was loose in the wood frame. There was no way that he could have stirred up enough air to move it by walking past it. That pane of glass has to be a 1/4 inch thick, and again the air outside was still. That night we only picked up 2 EVPs. A man's voice, which was what I consider a Class B EVP, said, 'You shouldn't be here,' which was recorded in the warden's quarters. And later that evening in the kitchen upstairs, we asked if anyone was here, and a woman's voice, or what we think sounded like a woman, said, 'I'm here.' Then they conducted a second investigation at the reformatory. This took place in November 2009, so this was a couple of months later. On this trip, we brought along my sister Allison, who is also interested in the paranormal. This trip, we had very few personal experiences other than some unexplained EMF readings in the bullpen around the large pillars, but we collected far more EVPs than we did the first trip. One of the most bizarre EVPs we caught took place in the bullpen while we were looking at and photographing the tunnels used in the Shawshank Redemption. The only way I can describe it is it was a wild laugh, but no one in the group remembered hearing that laugh. Another EVP was recorded in the library. We were looking at some strange metal box with a glass door on it. Joey had asked me if they had pets, and I replied, I have no clue what that was used for. The EVP we recorded said boots. So I don't know if they kept boots in whatever this box was, and so it was answering them that. The library that evening seemed to contain some activity. Joey and myself were standing at the counter looking at some of the books and papers, not saying anything. Once we started talking, we recorded a very gruff voice that said, "Shut up," as if the individual was a very heavy smoker. So, shut up.
That was a good impersonation, Dave. Ew.
The West cell block provided us with one of the clearest EVPs that I've ever recorded. A voice said, "Lights out," after we had asked if anyone wanted us to leave. I think that's telling you to leave. The most paranormal event that took place that will always stand out in my mind is when I felt that someone had touched my arm in the warden's quarters on August 8th, 2009, while on the haunted overnight stay with Haunted Heartland Tours, and that's actually Sherry Brake's tour group. The Ohio State Reformatory is full of interesting history. The overall construction is fascinating. I believe most people visit the facility not only for the paranormal experience, but to experience some of Ohio's history and perhaps some of the mystery as well. And I'd want to take pictures of the place. And then Jill Kepler was a volunteer and tour guide at the Reformatory starting in 2005, and she told Sherry, "The entire building has activity. You can't have a building be witness to so much negative activities and not have it retain it. My favorite spots are the East Cell Block, ground level, where you will see and hear former prisoners walking or hanging out of their cells, and the ground floor administrative wing. There are dark shadows, actual full-bodied apparitions, and the third floor warden's quarters also has shadows and voices. I have 4 incidents that stick in my mind. East Cell, ground level, my friend Peggy and I had 4 people, and she puts that in quotes, walking toward us. At one point, they disappeared only to start the whole thing over. I believe they did it 4 times and then stopped. Warden's quarters, 3rd floor, and a woman's voice on my tape recorder said, 'It's cold in here,' when no one was talking. Administrative, when the dark shadow appeared on the landing and exposed its face to me. And lastly, 3rd floor warden's area, a black orb formed in the doorway, came across the floor and hit me, sending an electrical shock through my body."
Oh my goodness.
I'd be like, maybe I don't want to work here anymore. No more volunteering for me, thanks.
Yeah, right.
And then KM31186 wrote on Reddit in 2020, "I first went to Mansfield Reformatory for a ghost hunt 2 years ago. It was a private one, so I was one of maybe 35 there. Before we were all left to go on our own and explore the place, we were given a tour. We were taken through places where the wardens of the place lived while they worked there and also where their families lived. During one part of the tour, I decided to lean up against the wall right next to where a long corridor was. I was listening to the guide explain about the history when I hear what I can only describe as pots and pans being moved around as if somebody is trying to get things out to cook. I put it in the back of my mind as other staff members getting things ready for the lockdown, etc. A couple of minutes later, I hear the same sound and look down the hallway, and there are no lights on and nobody is back there. As I'm looking back there was this other woman standing almost in the same spot as me, but on the opposite side. She then asked me, 'Did you hear something back there?' I explained to her that I did, but to not tell me what it was. I asked another person if she could let her explain to her what she heard before I explained my side of the story. She told her story to the woman, and then I told my story, and the woman's jaw dropped. We heard the exact same thing. Come to find out that back down that hallway, which we later went down, was where one of the wives loved to bake cakes for people who came to visit. But the room where she cooked was completely empty."
Wow, that's a really cool shared experience. And you know what? Clearly, the wife spirit liked them visiting the reformatory, and she was going to make them a cake.
Yeah, she figured you guys are here to see the place. I'll bake you something. And I would have been totally happy with it. I don't know what a ghost cake tastes like, but I love cake. So.
As long as it's got plenty of frosting on top for Diane.
Yeah, I'll try it.
Bunch of buttercream. Slap it on there.
And then we wanted to share, for those of you who didn't get a chance to listen to our paranormal conversation with Janae, this segment where she talks about her experiences when she was there.
I remember going up the stairs. And well, first of all, when we walked up to the building, that building is massive and just, it's a limestone building, and just the energy coming off of that was incredible. And one of the other girls in the group is sensitive. And so I always kind of get with her and go, "Okay, this is what I'm getting. What are you getting?" And like kind of not play off each other, but like kind of check in. And so we walked up to the building, and I looked up, and I said to her, I was like, "There's either a warden or a guard on the 2nd floor, and he's looking out that window." And she's like, "Yeah, I definitely feel a male presence, whatever." Well, we get up there, and it was the warden's office.
Oh.
And I'm like, okay. So like going up the stairs, whatever, we get to a certain floor, and I'm standing there, and I'm like, "There's a woman up here. Why is there a woman up here?" Because this was like a man's prison, whatever. Well, I found out from one of my friends that was listening to the thing, we were on the part where the living quarters were. So the warden's wife and stuff lived in that area. And one of the warden's wives actually died there. And they think she haunts I guess a gun misfired, or she might have been murdered.
Oh, and he hit her in the stomach or something, I think.
Yeah. Yep. But it was just weird because I walked up and I'm like, why is there a woman up here? Because it was under construction. So you really couldn't tell what it was supposed to be at that point. Like all the doors were shut and you just saw like plaster dust and buckets and everything everywhere. There was no real discernible, like, oh, this is the living quarters, right? Like it just looked like a mess. But then we went up to where the warden's office was. And every once in a while, I'm glad this isn't the normal for me because it's super uncomfortable. But every once in a while, I can physically feel things that they felt. And so we were like, there was like 4 rooms and a main room. And I remember walking into like the corner right room, and all of a sudden my chest just hurt and like I couldn't breathe. And like, it just felt like everything was closing up. And so I looked at my friend, I was like, I can't be in here. And I walked out and I kind of did like a big sweep of the whole floor. And as soon as I left that room, I was fine. I could breathe and all that kind of stuff. And I kept walking and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back in there and see if it happens again, because why not? So I walked back in and it immediately, like, I got short of breath. My chest hurt. My throat was starting to close. And I'm like, what is going on here? Well, the warden had a heart attack up there.
Oh, interesting.
Do some of the past inmates of the Ohio State Reformatory still remain in their cells? Have the intense emotions associated with this place been locked into the stone shell? And do things replay themselves over and over? Is the reformatory haunted?
That is for you to decide. Telling you, we have got to get up to Ohio one of these days. This is one of the places I definitely want to check out.
Yep.
Want to thank you guys for joining us on this Redux. I've been your host, Diane.
And this has been Kelly.
You take care now.
Bye-bye.